Awesome.
This is the Changing Times, Changing Worlds show. I am Chipicon, the host, and that is Ivo Dominguez Jr., who is I've only recently discovered how wonderful he is, and now I'm a big fangirl. So, so he is many, many things. He's got, okay, tonight he's going to be talking, he's going to be revisiting a workshop I saw at Sacred Space and said, oh, please come on the show and do it again. And I'm sure it'll be slightly different this time, as every workshop is. But yeah, take it away, Ivo, because if you have anything that you do need to say, and certainly promote anything that you would like to promote.
Sure. Honestly, I'll just get launched into the class.
Good.
And
I'll be happy.
I'll keep an eye for questions as well. So on Facebook truncates headlines a lot, the title. So the whole class is called Consequences of Magical Action, Aftercare, and Healing. And it's really a catch-all on paying attention to the things that are unintended or unexpected consequences from magical experiences, and finding ways to identify what is wrong, if there is something wrong, or whether it's simply a matter of time and healing, or a matter of changing practice in a way that is better for you. And I guess the first place to start with is that I have seen lots of different people in lots of different ritual contexts or healing contexts or meditative or path workings and whatnot, and seen a wide range of responses from incredibly favorable to people feeling ill, or people feeling lingering effects of one kind or another, or convincing themselves of all manner of things which may or may not be accurate that lead to further trouble down the line. And I'm going to start with an idea, and this is not the way I started the class at Sacred Space. I can't do the same class twice.
No.
But it's a pretty well accepted thing nowadays that there's a strong connection between mind and body. And what the mind visualizes, thinks about, what the heart feels, and so on, has an impact on your physical body, not just your physiology, but in the long term, changes the structures of your life, of your physicality, of your body. So if we have the idea that that which occurs in the mind also affects the body, let's expand that out to its logical next step. We are not just a physical body, we are also a collection of subtle bodies. You can think of that as layers of the aura or any number of things, but your energy bodies are just as much a part of your incarnation as your physical body, okay? Now, here's the thing. The energy bodies are not limited in the same way as the physical body by limits of time and space and form and structure. They are freer to change. Well, what that really means is that what we experience in our mind and in our emotions and in our soul have a bigger immediate impact on changing the shape of, or the health of, or what's going on with our energy bodies. So if the physical mind affects the physical bodies, so too does our thought and emotion affect the energy, the shape of our aura, the way things are structured, and so on. Honestly, if that wasn't true, we wouldn't be able to move, erase, or shape energy in magic. And when we engage in ritual, we intentionally change the shape of our energy to match what we are trying to accomplish. And in some cases, it's instinctive, and in other cases, it's something that is a planned out thing. But here's the thing that comes with experience over time. Not everything is an attack. In fact, most times it isn't. Not everything is oops, the ritual was poorly designed, or I lost my focus on the ritual. How about the following? At any given moment, you only have so much physical strength and so many, depending on how well rested you are, if you've been doing your due diligence to take care of your physical health, you have X amount of energy and stamina. Another way of looking at it is, everybody's only rated for so many amps of magic. And past that, they're going to blow a circuit, or they're going to burn out a circuit. So what I'm going to suggest is that the most common thing that people experience when they are in ritual, in meditation, casting spells, and so on, that is an unexpected and undesirable effect, is simply overload. You have exceeded your capacity at that moment. That's not your permanent capacity. We can improve, and at times when we're tired or ill or worn out emotionally, we have less capacity, but nonetheless, it is a matter of overload. So don't confuse having exceeded your capacity for any of the things that are more serious. Let me add another idea, and some of you will probably resemble this remark, but have you ever, and if not, I'm sure you've seen your friends do this, suddenly you decide that you're going to start working out or getting into better physical shape, and you do all the things, and the next day you find that your arms don't want to move, or your legs don't want to go up the steps. Or you have, if we have the weekend warrior syndrome, where if we exceed what we've been up to, then we suddenly find that the next day or the next week, we're not feeling so great as our bodies are slowly recovering. Yeah. There are a lot of folks that don't think of doing energy work or healing work or magical work. It is no different than physical fitness. If you do it regularly, whether that's meditating or ritual or magic, then you develop stamina and you develop flexibility and you develop strength, which then prevents the overload from hitting in the same way. So if it's been a while since you've been doing these kinds of things, and you suddenly throw yourself into a great deal of activity or into a heavy ritual, the next day, what you may be suffering from is the equivalent of sore muscles from the first day after you start moving your body again in places that you didn't know. And the reason I'm emphasizing these kinds of ideas is that, hey, I said that the mind affects the body, and that our mind and spirit and soul also affect the shape of and constitution of our subtle bodies. So if we decide that something has happened to us, we begin to create it within ourselves. We begin to create it within our subtle bodies. So it's really important to be mindful of, I just have aching astral muscles, as opposed to anything more serious. All right. Now, there's also here, I'm going to give you a very short story about a friend and former coven mate, no longer in the air, moved away, far away, taking care of her elderly mom. But she once called me up in the middle of the night because she said, it feels like my bone marrow is boiling, which is an interesting way to begin a conversation. And I said, what did you do? And she had purchased, on the recommendation of several of our friends, a really good book. I'm not going to mention the book or the details, but the deal was, it was a book that was supposed to be used over the course of a year, with gradual exercises that you did that are energy exercises and all manner of working with your ki and your prana and all sorts of things. Well, she decided that because she was very committed to getting the work done fast, that she would do all the exercises in the book over the course of a month and a half instead of a year. She overdid and kind of fried herself. And I said, okay, I'm afraid, here's what I'm going to suggest to you. Stop. So you would never guess that I sunburn easily. And having spent most of my childhood in Florida, I can tell you, I sunburn and it comes off in big ugly sheets, and it's not fun at all. So here's the thing. Do you feel the worst extern immediately? Nope. Depending upon how bad and how intense the sun, you might begin to feel it a few hours too late, or it may be that the next day you wake up and go, oh, that was really, really a bad thing I did, didn't I? By the way, I fell asleep once on the beach in San Diego, so I have a sense of what too much is. So what do you do when you have a really bad sunburn? You get out of the sun, you stay out of the sun, you cover up, use sunscreen, you drink lots of water, you baby yourself until you're not feeling the chills and feeling like something's really wrong with you. When you have an overload, an excessive amount of energy that you've experienced, and I'm going to use other words in a minute to this. The first thing is get out of the sun and start doing self-care. And it's not that you have that you're, oh, well, I'm never going to do that ritual again. I'm never going to do magic again. Or I'm so stupid. What did I do that was wrong? No, you exceeded your loading capacity. Now, I wear some shirts that are and big floppy hats in the summer all the time because that's my best way of coping. The point is you learn how to accommodate and or increase your capacity to do more. The other thing is that sometimes the scariest things that people experience is that they will come away from a ritual or going to, I'm doing this probably 3 weeks from now, going to somebody's house to see if there's something truly wrong with that house or if something is inhabiting that space or what the creepy thing is and so on. And people will come away from a place, a ritual, a situation, and they'll feel like, it feels like that spirit so-and-so followed me home. It feels like that goddess, god, Orisha, angel, fill in the name for whatever it is, followed you home or is really trying to get your attention. And they want me, and I saw them in the ritual and they're still there. And it's like, looking around. Some of you are old enough for this, and if not, I'll give you the background. Hey, who remembers the really awful days of flash photography in the early days where the camera bulb was so ridiculously bright when it flashed that you saw sparkling dots for a hell of a long time afterwards, right? And if you haven't had the joy of experiencing that early stage of technology, there are probably times when you've accidentally looked at the sun at the wrong time, and then you have this after image that keeps blinking for a while in your, you know what? You can also have the equivalent of an after image that follows you home from an intense experience. And it may be that and it takes discernment and it takes guidance from others as well. But it may be that instead of, oh, I'm the latest person that called me about one of these, Hecate is pursuing me and she followed me home from the ritual. I'm going like, based on what you're saying, I'm not sure that that's the case, but I'm sure that that left a huge mark on you. Now I'm going to use, it's an adult crowd, so I can do this. So I used to go to a lot of camp out festivals. I'm doing fewer of them because there's a limit to what my body wants to do nowadays, but I still go to some of them. And it was a clothing optional event. And they had these nasty aluminum chairs. And, I put my towel down on the chair because I was naked, but I still sat down on it anyway. And when I got up, my butt looked like Belgian waffle because all the imprints from the iron or aluminum or whatever it was had pressed themselves in my flesh. You've probably had a situation of waking up with lines on your face from the bed sheets or the pillowcases or whatnot, and it takes a while for those to work their way out, but they do, especially if you hydrate. There are also times that if the idea of an after image doesn't stick, if you have been pressed against a powerful, focused, coherent energy, whether that's a person, a thing, whatever, for a long period of time, it leaves dents in your aura, if you want to think of it that way. First clue, the best thing that you can do for any of these things is what healing practices and self-care practices do you want? Period. I mean, yeah, I'm going to touch on the idea of actual malice or actual curses or other kinds of things that go wrong. But I'm simply going to say that most of the time, it's a matter of buffing out and pushing out the dents in your aura. You've probably experienced the people have been doing this for a long time. Somebody has a headache or a pain in their body, and somebody who's a friend or a healer or themselves will basically try to smooth out the energy or smooth out the constriction or the restriction to cause flow of energy again, to bring back sense of feeling good. That's the kind of stuff that's the first go-to, rather than assuming that something is terribly wrong. I got a call. I'm going to tell little stories as I go. And this is, I used to own actually twice, so a total of like 16 years, I had a metaphysical shop. So I have, and if you have ever had a metaphysical shop, people show up with the most amazing things to ask about and to say and to overshare with. But in this case, so I've experienced it at the shop, but I also experienced it from people in my broader community. And there are two people that called me within about, I don't know, 6-7 hours of each other, both claiming that the other had cursed them. Pretty common thing for people to claim, unfortunately. Now, here's the good news. In that particular case, I had been present when they had their big blow up. And these are two people that were legit magical people, moved a fair amount of energy. and they were like in their almost in each other's faces, close enough for the spittle to be going a little bit as they were yelling at each other. So it was like they didn't hit each other, but they were in each other's energy field, and it was going hard. Now, I told them both the same thing. They're both powerful witches, because that's how they identify, as witches. And you have spent many, many years learning how to connect your emotions and your visualization to moving and shaping and controlling energy, which means that you are in the same category as somebody who has been trained in martial arts at boot camp or somewhere else. And now you cannot allow yourself to be out of control, because what I perceived as you both flash fried each other's auras because you were angry at each other and you knew each other. So there was a connection and you were raising a lot of energy. And no, neither of you and are, from my perspective, capable of intentionally doing something malicious to each other. But I do think that we can, whether it's with words or with energy, we can certainly hurt each other and regret it afterwards. But if you're a magical person, you have to be careful not to allow the energy to, you know what I'm saying, get out of control. And what did I tell them to do? One of them I knew would like this suggestion, said, go to the person that does Reiki for you. The other person I said, go to that person that likes to, buff out and smooth and retint your chakras. I mean, I'm being glib about it, but basically I suggested go to those places and those people that have an offering that is about putting your energy back in balance. And if you don't have that as an option, I'm going to make some suggestions in a moment, but it ultimately is about what do you need to restore the balance of your mind, your heart, and your energy. And that can be multiple things. And that is the way that the things become learning and growthful as opposed to detrimental. I mentioned earlier the idea of flexibility, and I'm going to define what I mean in a magical context. So flexibility of your energy or your spirit or your capacity to reach, it's not about how far you can reach or how much you can push or how much you can stretch out your energy. It's how far you can do this and return to your normal shape without tearing. Hey, I can make myself stretch farther than I should, but there'll be a penalty for that. So that if we overexert, sometimes it's because we now have the equivalent of that kind of connective tissue damage in our energy field. You want to think of it that way. Remember, everything that you know about physical reality has its echo, its analog, its corresponding part in anything that's magic or energy. So everything that you know about physical health also applies here as well. I'm looking to see. I'll catch up with some of the comments on the question in a moment. So this is going to sound really simple, but people seem to forget. Use all the tools you have. Honestly, I cannot tell you how many times I've told people, have you pulled some cards to see if there's any guidance on what you're experiencing? Have you thrown some runes? Have you cast some shells? Have you gotten out those yarrow stalks and consulted the I Ching? The point is, if there is a system of divination that you have access to, either because you yourself use it, or you have a compatriot that is willing to ask the question, what's going on with my energy or my dreams, or why am I so wonky, post this, whatever. And preferably it's somebody who has enough detachment so they don't immediately go to the place of fear. I used to do a lot of readings when I had the shop. Ridiculous number of readings over the years. And one of the things that I always began with was a little prayer, affirmation, centering thing for myself, where I said, show me the things that I can make a difference with. Don't show me anything that I have no capacity to change or to help with. And you can figure out other words that maybe don't allow me to succumb to fear, whatever, but put in a filter before you start asking the question of what's wrong. Because otherwise you'll get an answer that is, I haven't had to do this for a long time, but it'd be the equivalent of going to the barber and asking if I need a trim. Sure, because so that there's an implicit bias when you're asking a question about what's wrong. So begin with something that basically is a balancing out against that. Now, who here has been told grounding and centering? You're ungrounded. That's the problem right now. Well, sometimes that is the problem, but you know what? It isn't always the problem. And indeed, I'm about to suggest that sometimes telling somebody to ground and center in certain situations actually aggravates it. How? Let's go back to the moment of the idea of you've been in the sun, your skin is fried to a crisp. What do? You get out of the sun. The thing with grounding and centering is that the way that it is mostly taught or mostly understood, and I'm going to suggest some other ways to do it, is to plug yourself into the energy network of the world and reach upwards to the above, join the above and the below, and so that anything that is excess flows through you and out of you, and so that you are not holding your breath and running on battery power and draining yourself rather than tapping into other sources of energy. And in many cases, that's exactly what you need to do. However, if you are already crispy around the edges, the harder you ground and center, the more you open yourself up to flow of energy when you actually need some time in the shade with a cup of, iced tea. Do you understand what I'm saying? In a sense, it can aggravate what's already going on. However, and I'm going to call this the introvert's style of grounding and centering. It's not what I call it, but it'll work for this moment. One of the things that I suggest as both a diagnostic for assessment and also as a self-care technique in these moments is instead, and show of hands or some way to indicate so I don't have to explain everything. Am I assuming that everybody here has been exposed to the tree visualization form of grounding and centering? Pretty much. Okay, I see a lot of people. So I'm going to assume that everybody has been told about put your roots down deep towards in the earth and reach your branches up to the sky, yada, yada. Okay. Do that, but ground and center within yourself, not the world. In other words, let's imagine the space between your root chakra or your crotch or whatever and your throat. Imagine that torso, that space in between, and imagine yourself standing inside yourself. And you probably have some kind of inner temple, safe space, landscape within, lots of different ways of visualizing it. And in that space, rather than sending your roots down into the earth below, send your energy roots down into your root chakra or your groin or whichever way you want to think of it, and reach upwards to your throat chakra and basically see the shining light of your crown chakra at the top. And basically ground and center within yourself in your own personal landscape, in your own sanctuary. And why is that useful? Because it's a way to move inwards and circulate just your energy and just yourself so that you can figure out, I feel better now because I'm not being overwhelmed by the outside. I can recuperate because I've taken myself out of the loop that included all the other things that at that moment I don't have the spoons for, that I don't have the capacity for. Now, you can't stay there and you can't live there because you actually do need to be plugged into the world to do a variety of things, but stepping inwards into that space and then stepping back out will also tell you whether or not what you're responding to is in the atmosphere around you in that moment. Do you get the idea? It's like, is it something that is happening around me right now? So, and I'm going to give a second piece to that. The other bit is if you have a way of creating a warded space, a protected space, and there's lots of different styles, whether to create a warded space or I mean, for most people, the first thing comes to mind is circle casting, but there's a bazillion other ways to create protected and warded space. Though that's a whole nother class. But create that, step into it. Remember, create it, but then you're going to step in and out of, make a small little warded space. Step into it, step back out. What are we doing? We're comparing how does it feel like when I'm inside that space? What does it feel like when I'm outside that space? because that's also going to give you a sense of, because if you feel the same and you still feel like something is off, then whatever the issue is now something that you have internalized, so that is not something that is, you are receiving. It is something that is now formed an attachment in your energy field, or is a pattern. And it, by the way, energy attachments don't necessarily mean astral tics, though sometimes they do. What it often means is you can create a nasty little thought form that is now playing on heavy rotation in your energy. I mean, psychologically, people talk about tapes that they play in their head over and over again that are not great for them. We can do similar things with our energy, and bring home an intense experience and have it on loop in your energy field. So you can begin to determine, kind of do a differential diagnosis of, is it inside or outside? Is warding helping or not helping? Now, I'm going to suggest something that you might want to try. It works for me. It's worked for a number of people that I've taught it to. And for other people, it just doesn't work, because there is no one size fits all for techniques or methods. But for a lot of people, I find it's much easier to try to observe somebody else's aura and energy than themselves. So, that really overdone but still useful energy exercise where people tell you to rub your hands together and hold your hands so that you can feel the energy tingling back and forth and forming a ball of energy, and so on and so on. Well, make the biggest, most brilliant, most dense ball of energy you can, and then flatten it in your hands. Hopefully you have a flat wall in front of you somewhere. And I want you to then spread the energy that you've just raised out of yourself and make a mirror in the wall. It's not going to last long, but you can make a mirror out of your own energy to reflect back what it is that, and basically look at yourself in that wall mirror that you've just created out of your own energy. It like I said, effectiveness varies, but I've found it useful, and many others have as well, as a way of getting a glimpse at your own energy to see, oh, there's this big, gray thing hovering on my shoulder, and that I've been feeling all day. I guess something is there. Can somebody else double check? I cannot say that I recommend, if you seriously feel like something's going on that needs attention, find people that you can trust to spot you, check you. Humans are social creatures for a variety of reasons, and one of the reasons, as Sir Terry Pratchett said in his Discworld books on the witches, it's, the reason that witches have to hang out together is to watch each other, to make sure that they don't cackle, which is to say that they don't go off the deep end. And sometimes you need to have a reality check from people that are broadly in your community, whether or not, and I'm saying broadly in your community because I understand the vast majority of people currently don't work in covens, groves, lodges, and so on. But you probably have people that you can check with. Hey, can you check this out for me? See if you're seeing what I'm seeing. And let's not forget physical issues. Sometimes you may have a spiritual thing going on, but physical issues matter. I mean, I was at a restaurant post a gathering with a bunch of folks, and there was a person who was having stuff going on, and everybody at the table assumed that she was having some kind of psychic fallout from the thing that had happened at the gathering. And I was looking and going like, and they're all like trying to do whatever flavor of work that they do to try to help her. And I'm not going to name names, but I basically yelled across the table, "Yo, so-and-so, have you checked your sugar lately?" Oh, suddenly a sip of soda, and she was feeling a hell of a lot better, because her blood sugar was like, I don't know, 45. It was ridiculously low. Because you know how we are when we're at gatherings, at conferences, at events, or have been focused on doing spiritual work for an extended period of time, and we forget we have these physical vehicles called the body that require certain things. And it's more difficult when it's a bit of both. when it's both a physical thing going on and a spiritual, and they can aggravate each other as well, or work against each other. Now, I'm going to say something about what if you're the one that's being asked to help, because, and I include this in every talk I can, because there will be times when you are the caregiver or the helper, and other times when you're receiving the help. And the first thing I'm going to suggest is the least intrusive measures are best. And I'll give you an example of that, because you don't know. You may, and by the way, are you the best person in the room to be doing it? Do you know the old shtick about somebody's had a physical accident, and you look around the room, there's a doctor, there's a nurse, and there's an EMT. Who do you hand it over to? The EMT. Why? Because they are the ones trained for dealing with the situation in the moment. The nurse would be your next best bet, and the doctor is the last person you want dealing with an emergency situation out in the field. Anyway, are you the best? Is there somebody else in the room that it should be turned over to? So always double check. And if it looks like everybody wants to help at once, then your primary job is to keep the mob off from trying to help the person. You understand what I'm saying? Anyway, let's say that you've decided that you're the right person to do the work. Let's say that what's the most urgent need? It's triage time in that moment. Is the person feeling discomfort? Is the person feeling like their identity is woozy, or they feel like they're being overwritten or ridden by something? Are they too giggly? Is it too much euphoria? Figure out which are the things that are going on. By the way, I always look for this one just because. Are their pupils both equally dilated? Are they having jerking moving motions, and are they symmetrical on both sides of the body? I'm always still paying attention to the physical effects. Side note, I got a call once from somebody who said, I think a spirit is trying to get my attention, and they described what was going on. I said, no, dude, get to the doctor. That's a retinal detachment. So don't assume that it's always magical stuff, because you know what? If it is magical stuff, it will force itself until you pay attention to it. The physical stuff you can ignore, but the magical stuff or spiritual stuff will find a way to get through to you eventually, if it is. So back to the least intrusive method. All right, let's say the person is feeling exceptionally drained of energy, which is not an unusual situation, or they're feeling like they can't catch their breath, and the rhythm of their thoughts is all out of whack. Honestly, you're not going to try to talk them through grounding and centering. Probably not going to work if they're that bad. I'm going to suggest that you don't try to lay hands upon them and fill them with enough Reiki energy to melt gold. What I'm going to suggest is that you become the model of balance and health. You sit close to them. You breathe so that you can feel that your energy is slowly reaching out to them. You ground and center yourself. You begin to softly find the balance. And if you work with 4 elements, find the 4 elements within. And if you work with the chakras, use the chakras. Whatever it is that you work with that represents your system of seeing wholeness or balance, bring it up within you, be close to them, and basically radiate that. What happens? If you are, everybody here has had the teaching of, if you hit a tuning fork and that's a particular note, if there's a guitar string or a piano string nearby, what's that string going to do? It's going to resonate. It's going to vibrate. So become a radiant source of balance and health, close enough to the person, because you want their self to notice, oh, that's what balance looks like or feels like, and encourage their own healing process or rebalancing process to kick in on its own, rather than trying to do it for them. I'm not saying there aren't times you have to do, there are times that you basically have to do the equivalent of Magick CPR, but most of the time you simply have to be a solid, calming influence and use your energy in the most indirect way possible, resonance first, before going elbows deep into their aura to try to do something which may make things worse. Right? Now, and obviously take this with a grain of salt or a whole salt lick, because there are people that have particular training in different healing modalities, and they may have a different sense of what to do in that moment. But as a general principle, the least intrusive is usually the safest bet. You can also ask yourself, did they do something that it isn't about energy? Information and essence can also get you in all sorts of knots. Essence overload or essence problems are when usually people feel that their identity is disrupted, or that they feel more strongly the presence of another being or another spirit. Sounds stupid, but it works. Get the person to start saying out loud, and you can repeat with them, or get some other people to repeat with them, all their names, their full mundane name, any magical name, any nicknames, any names that have ever applied to them. And then if they run out of names, you're the son of, the daughter of, who's your mom, who's your dad, who are your grandparents, any and all things that connect them to their identity and their selfhood are a way to draw them back into that place. Now, there are things that are, the quick and dirties. Who here has used Florida water for somebody who's gone off the deep end post-ritual? No? You don't have to use Florida water. It's just easily available, and I've used it many times. But honestly, just sprinkling a couple of drops of Florida water on a napkin or a towel, and just putting it on their forehead so they can smell it, is enough sometimes to slowly begin. Because here's the other thing: smells go in whether or not the rest of the person is paying attention or is capable of paying attention. And I'm not going to say smelling salts, but pleasant smells bring you back. And that is something that I think is underrated and not used often enough. What if the person feels like they're flying, or they feel like they're floating above themselves? Okay. Well, this is now crossing the line to being a little bit more active. And by the way, it works for yourself too. I will dig, imagine that my feet are digging into the ground, and I will see I go counterclockwise for this, use whatever makes sense to you. I imagine two counterclockwise spirals of energy coming out from my feet and basically anchoring me in the ground. You can visualize anything you like, because remember, the mind shapes the body, even more so the subtle bodies, because you need to, if somebody was being carried away in a hot air balloon, wouldn't you like to be firmly tied to the ground before you tried to reach up and grab them? So what I'm going to suggest is anchor yourself before reaching with your mind or with your words to help somebody pull back down in. You get the idea? And what I just described is not about grounding yourself in the normal sense of the electrical model of grounding, where it's about energy. It's about, no, you are fixing yourself hard and fast to the earth plane so that you can help the person, pull their way back, or you can help them pull themselves back in. Now, let's say that you do find something that looks off in the person's energy, or a place that hurts, or a place where they've been in contact with something that they believe is unpleasant. Maybe they did bring back one of those astral ticks, or maybe they picked up something when they were with you at that creepy house, or there was somebody at a ritual that was perhaps not the most wholesome human being to be at a public ritual. Any number of possibilities. And this is cheap, easy, and stupid simple. Okay, let's think for a moment. Do you have something in the house that is silver or silver plated? Probably. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be much. Though I have a little candy tray that I picked up at a garage sale once, and I looked at the maker's mark. Crap, I lucked out. But there's a reason why there are so many bits of folklore about silver being used as a weapon against certain kinds of unwholesome things. Silver is the metal of the moon. Silver is the metal that has a strong presence in the astral. And if you don't like the word astral, think of it as the places that are right spitting distance from the physical, near us. And I will take the sacred silver candy dish, or the sacred, actually this one looks cooler. So let's say the sacred silver plated cake cutting and serving device. and I will pour blue fire into that silver. I will awaken the power of the silver, awaken the power of its connection to the moon and the astral, and I will put it right on top of the boo-boo on that person's energy field and scald the crap out of whatever's attached to them. And sometimes that's enough. It's like the equivalent in the old days of using fire to help get a tick off. And the plus, or let's say somebody has a wound where they're weeping energy out of their energy field, you can cauterize it enough for it to start healing itself and shutting using just a bit of silver that's been activated with energy, and use it as a magic cautery if you wish to. There are other techniques, but do not underestimate the simple things as well as being very valuable. I'm going really fast because honestly, with these kind of classes, this is a weekend-long class, and we're doing what we can in the space and time we have available. So who here has done egg cleanses or had an egg cleanse? Have you heard about egg cleanses? Yeah, okay, well, some have and some haven't, so I'll give the quick and dirty. My exposure, of course, is because, you know, I was born in Cuba, came over right after the revolution, yada, yada. My family, part of the family came first, so every relative, I was about to say every damn relatives, but yeah, every relative crashed at our house when they arrived from Cuba until they could find a place to live, and et cetera. So my childhood prepared me for paganism because every sleeping space, every chair, every sofa was always covered with relatives for most of my childhood until we moved out of Florida. And I never knew how many people would be at the dinner or breakfast table. Anyway, but egg cleanses, I had many relatives that did them to me. And here's the thing. What is an egg? Let's break it down. An egg is almost life. It's a blank slate. It's proto-life. It's ready, it's potential ready to begin. So if somebody has malaise, negative energy, something off in their field, and you want to have a sponge to soak it up off of them, and there's a crap ton of styles for doing this, but here's the essence of it. Whether you start at the head or start at the feet or start at the middle, and there's also different people do different techniques of how they basically go all over the body with the egg, rubbing it against the skin. And while they're doing that, they might be praying, they might be chanting, or they might be visualizing. But basically, you're trying to draw whatever energetic toxins, whatever imbalance out of the person and into the egg. And it works because it is easier to get that kind of stuff to attach to something that looks like it could be animal flesh, looks like it could be alive, feels enough like it's capable of taking the imprint of something. And then you dispose of that egg. I mean, if you feel like it, some people crack it open and try to look at it to analyze, you know, use it as a diagnostic tool as well, yada, yada. Or you go in the backyard, dig a hole and crack it into the ground and say, thank you for your work. I'm keeping it simple and as neutral in terms of cultural significance, because basically you're using the natural virtues of an egg. By the way, there's a mostly hidden in history. There's a third branch of alchemy that is mostly hidden because there were a lot of people that misused it. You've probably heard of plant alchemy. You've probably heard of metal alchemy or crystal alchemy. There was also an alchemy that dealt with animal flesh, and you can guess why that one kind of got removed from study, because sometimes there were some unethical things involved in that process. But I don't feel guilty about using an egg. I'm a vegetarian. I have my own chickens. They actually are spoiled, but I don't feel guilty about using that for that purpose because it's not a living thing yet. Okay. And chickens lay no matter what. But the point is, experiment with using the egg cleanse. And there's a thing about the egg cleanse that, and actually any of the work related to this, that you need to bear in mind. Like there's healing ritual where you give the person a purification bath, and basically the purification bath is to leach things out of their aura that are going to go down the drain, right? And then you put them in bed and you give them a tea, usually hot milk, or you can use coconut milk or oat milk, with star anise and chamomile, and you put a candle and you sit with them and you have the shades down. And you know what? They were already cleansed when you did the egg cleanse and they took the bath. The reason you keep them in that bed for several hours doing all that other stuff is so they don't pop a stitch. It's so that they don't oh, I feel better. And then like an hour later, like they immediately have their fears or their memory, the imprint in their energy field. They've remembered the problem and they've recreated it or called it home. So sometimes the most important part of any kind of healing ritual of this nature is to continue to do the supportive stuff that convinces the person, hey, it really has been fixed, or hey, I really am on the road to recovery. Because every little fear. All right, so think about it this way. These experiences are not unlike when people are trying to disconnect from another human being. And you've probably heard of people using cord cutting rituals to disconnect from exes or troublesome people in their life and so on. And you know what? They often have to be repeated several times because the memory and the pattern is so deeply ingrained that it's kind of like weed roots. The roots, it's kind of like the roots from kudzu or pokeweed. It only takes one tiny little sliver for that to grow back. So that a lot of this kind of work is about making sure that you don't reintroduce yourself or recall, and recall, I mean in both sense of the word, to mind and also to summon those things back into yourself. I'm going to pause for a second. I've been talking pretty much nonstop for a while, and I have not looked. Are there questions that people desperately need to hear answers to, or just keep...
take a moment to look through the chat?
Yeah, because
it's got a pretty high-powered audience here too.
I know. I know.
That's why we like cons, is because we can get together.
And I have to admit that I love Zoom in the sense that it makes certain things possible, but I sure prefer in person whenever possible.
Oh, yeah.
And there's some techniques you really can't teach at a distance because you have to be close enough to watch the person as they're moving their energy or trying to do stuff and say, hey, you're pulling back, or you're pulling your punches, you're not moving enough energy, or you're moving too much energy, or any number of things. Or you've been doing the equivalent of holding your breath energetically while you've been doing this work. You know that you're supposed to be drawing from the universe, but you're concentrating so hard that you're forgetting to actually take in energy and let it circulate. Anyway.
Yeah, I'd love to get you and Star Wolf together.
Yes.
Hope you don't blow up the world. And Arkenstone, my God, the three of you together.
Mine Arkenstone. I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes blowing up the world sounds more appealing. It depends upon the latest decision by the Supreme Court any given. You know.
So but you can unmute yourself if you have a question to ask, guys.
And if I'm gonna have a sip of tea then.
Yeah, let the man drink. Okay, well.
I'm going to suggest, all right, I'm going to suggest that if you go to my website, there's a place where you can find chants and path workings. And they're actually MP3 files or or some kind of audio file, because it's changed over the years which ones I've created. Some are now currently M4A or whatever. Anyway, but they are, there's some chants there you might want, but I'm actually aiming you at the path workings. And there's one that is about clearing the inner storm. And give it a listen. It's about 14 minutes. And I'll explain why, because it's one of the points on my outline that I don't have time to do that full talk about. But here's the thing. The more magical you are, and by that I mean the longer you've been at this, the more regular practitioner you are, the more your thoughts become forms. Your capacity to visualize, to move energy, to move essence, information management, create more durable thought forms. In addition to the idea of the astral that belongs to all of us, or the dreamscape, or whatever you want to call it, that is in the common, each of us has a personal bubble that is our own personal astral. Think of it this way. You have subtle bodies in each of the planes of reality, and the personal space that's yours and yours alone is is part of your personal astral. And it can get cluttered with fears, images, imaginings, bits of memory, anything that is strong enough to imprint. Remember, comparing it to something else, in the same way that places and buildings and homes and objects can acquire the imprint of a powerful memory, often a powerful emotional one, whether that becomes a haunting or something just being picked up with psychometry. We imprint the world. We can also imprint our personal astral and becomes cluttered. So there's all this flotsam and jetsam of undigested bits of potato and other things that are floating around in our personal astral. And that pathworking is one method for clearing away and cleansing, because sometimes it is what we're actually experiencing is the accumulation of undigested or unprocessed stuff that's still floating in our personal astral, in our dreamscape, rather than it being something new and troublesome. But listen to the pathworking. I think it's pretty useful. And is that Griffinbrook trying to?
Yeah, that's me having my hand up here.
Yep.
It took a while for me to get the question back after having heard so many interesting things after the question popped into my mind. But some of the most significant work I've ever done in my life has been as a home health aide trained in hospice care.
Yes.
And I've been in and out of healthcare since I worked in a hospital to avoid going to Vietnam. And I learned to be a respiratory therapist there. So death has always been an area. And when you combine it with a commitment to heal the sick, comfort the dying, and all of that, I realized in context now, listening to all the things I hear on Wednesday night, and your concept of the least intrusive methods possible. Because as a hospice aide, I was tremendously effective when I really didn't do anything but be there. And some of the worst outcomes I've seen come from family members who try to do all the wrong things.
Right.
But there was, my last hospice patient, I clocked in and I saw that his wife was sitting by the hospital bed in the living room. And he was just there holding his hand. He had gone from still being active to being completely unresponsive over a period of about 4 months. So I just sat down in the other chair and held his hand for 2 hours. And I still think that's probably 2 of the best hours of work I've done. And I was interested because what you've said tonight, Ivo, has all been another part in this chain of me connecting theoretically non-magical things with their magical underpinnings, like even my Zen practice. So I tossed that out there to see if you had any thoughts on it, or just to express my gratitude for being able to share that tidbit.
Go ahead.
No, your turn.
Honestly, the more integration is a goal in many spiritual or psychological systems. The more you find ways to connect whatever knowledge you've gained from physical world experience, work experience, and connected back to how you do your magic or how you do your practice, the better. And there is no field of knowledge that does not give you insights into the spiritual world. I mean, every single one. I mean, honestly, if you actually believe, and I have two spiritual truths that I feel absolutely sure about. One, I believe in the bell-shaped curve applying to many things in many realms, the probability curve, and probably just as importantly, as above, so below is not just about complicated, chain of being or different planes of reality. It's everything from the smallest to the largest repeats similar patterns. So every field of endeavor is connected and is ultimately leads back to the whatever constitutes the background wisdom of the universe. Didn't say background noise. I'm going to say the background wisdom of the universe. So yeah, everything you learned as a hospice worker is absolutely applicable to this work and many other things. Anybody who has ever worked in a job where they have to listen to people also learns a variety of things about themselves and about the world.
And it's really good to know that that integration actually matters,
It does.
because I've had this wild checkerboard of a career
Mhm.
where I've been a respiratory therapist, a public accountant, a corporate accountant, a high-tech engineer, and so forth and so on.
Mhm.
And yet somehow, well, I looked at when I worked as a high-tech engineer, yes, I had my test routines. I was in charge of Windows automated testing, but I was still there helping people.
Sure.
Maybe not in any deep spiritual way, but what they
Um,
into, go ask Bill, he'll know.
Well, I'm going to suggest that all of this work, especially in making for the best possible aftercare, healing, magical growth and development, comes down to you never stop being a magical person, no matter what you're doing. You could be doing the dishes and you're still a magical person. You could be doing your taxes and you're still a magical person. I mean, when we embrace that there is no place in our life where, if you believe that everything has spirit, I do, that everything has its own measure of life and soul, then there isn't anything that we can do that isn't magical or spiritually important, and that all our tasks, it's when we break them apart from each other that it gets harder. Hey, I'm going to throw one thing in about a simple ritual, or maybe not so simple ritual, that is not the same as going for soul retrieval or something complicated that requires more hours of training than a quick class, but a simple technique that has been effective for a variety of things. Imagine a circle, a dot in the center. What have I just drawn? The glyph for the sun in astrology. And you can think of it as the circle of infinity, and that dot in the center is the finite. Finite and the infinite represented as one. Okay. And imagine that you draw this on the ground. So you have this large circle that you've drawn in energy or blue tape, the sacred magical thing that we use nowadays because it doesn't ruin the floor. And then draw a triangle inside that. So you have a triangle inside the circle with a dot in the center. And you can think of that as several repetitions of the idea of how the finite and the infinite connect. And the sun is the central power that holds our self together. It's your divine spark. It's the spark that holds the solar system together, etc. So you got that idea. Have somebody stand in it or sit in it, depending upon what their physical needs are in that moment, and have them invoke themselves back into themselves. They can use their own language, but may all the parts of me that have strayed return. May all that is not of me depart. May all that is not of me depart. May all that is me return. And have that build and get longer and stronger. And if you have helpers, you can do this solo, but if you have helpers, we had a friend she had two fairly serious concussions within a rather short span of time from each other. So she was not well and she was not herself. And part of her healing process was that she would sit in the center inside that circle with the dot and the triangle, and be two or three of us on the outside, arms raised upwards, reaching out and calling her name and asking as well, and acting basically like a funnel or a net or an antenna to help her draw back in those parts of her that had strayed. Because sometimes it's not a question of somebody has soul loss, but they've been stretched too thin, or they've been dislocated, or they've lost touch with something that's still connected to them, but is still part of them. And the simple act of asking for anything that's yours to return and anything that is not to depart is remarkably powerful and remarkably simple. And if you have helpers that are energetically sensitive, then it has a pretty strong effect. I'm going to suggest another trick that is, you can do it at any stage of your life. The sooner you start it, the better. And when is the best time to start? Today. Is I have a little jar that has a fire agate crystal inside it. You can pick whatever you want. I don't care. But I have a little fire agate crystal, and you'll understand what it is. Whenever I am feeling at my best, when I'm feeling strong, I'm feeling confident, my magic's working, I feel all is right with me, I open that little jar, I take in a deep breath, and I blow as much of my energy as I can into that stone. Cap it up. I've been doing this for a long time. What's it for? You know, most human beings don't have the spiritual equivalent of perfect pitch. I mean, my friend, it's both a blessing and a curse. My friend Iris Gonzalez can, you know, tune a piano, tune a violin by ear. And if you ask her, I'd like to hear A flat, she opens her mouth and A flat comes out as good as a tuner on for the guitar. It's a gift. It's wired into her. But most of us don't have spiritual perfect pitch to know when we're in tune. So save a sample of your energy when you're at your best, so that when you're feeling like something's amiss, I open a little jar, I take a sniff and go, oh, that's how I'm supposed to feel. That's how I'm supposed to sound. And if it's something more serious and I'm asking for a friend to help, I give them the little stone and say, tune into this before you do any work on me. That's what I'm supposed to be. Do you get the idea? It's basically, I'm saving a sample of what my healthy energy feels like. It's the tuning fork, yeah. So, and but anybody can do it for themselves, and you can use it to remind yourself of yourself, or you can also, if you have helpers, you can use it as a way for them to tune in more effectively into what natural, healthy you looks like when it's not encumbered by any number of other things. And it's a simple technique. And you can use anything that feels right to you. I used a fire agate because they're pretty.
It's something like possessing yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because and sometimes we merely need a reminder. We forget ourselves.
I think it's time for us to thank you and to let you go, because I'm sure that Jim wants you back.
He's been very carefully keeping the dogs at bay so they don't intervene and show up in the show.
Oh, we wouldn't mind seeing your dogs. We are anyway, but thank you so much. This is wonderful. I'm sure we'll get lots of hits on the YouTube. And I'm going to continue pestering you and doing everything I can to get you to come. I know you live a long way from New England, and so.
You know, soon I'll be, I've got 6 more weeks. And after that, I've got the doctor's permission to start traveling again. So later this year, next year, I can travel again. Yay.
Well, I was going to say, if not, and, you know, for people like Arkenstone, we're, you know, we have, that's why we have the virtual track for changing time. So
True enough.
we can have Oberonzel and Diana Paxson coming in from the
West Coast, yeah,
from the West Coast or Hawaii or Spain or wherever.
right, right.
I think this is wonderful. It's you know, the best technology is indistinguishable from magic in the best ways. So anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to hit the unrecord.
Yes,
is there anything that you would like to say before I stop the recording?
IvoDominguezJr.com is pretty easy to find me.
Yep. And I can tell you from personally, he's got a lot of fun videos on YouTube. So
and chants on my website and the path workings. Please do the clearing the inner storm path working.
And his books are great. So anyway, so
all right, dear one.
Yeah, it's